Nobody has lived in the village of Chandpur Khera for 41 years, yet tonight, dinner is served. Steam rises from porcelain bowls inside a house whose roof caved in a decade ago. The silverware on the table is polished to a mirror finish, untouched by rust, while the doorframe around it has rotted into soft black pulp. Vines have swallowed the streets outside, and the wind smells of wet stone and old smoke, but inside, on a table draped in linen so white it seems to glow, the food is always fresh. Who, or what, is still cooking for a population of ghosts? The story starts with a wedding that never finished. In November of 1985, the village of Chandpur Khera gathered for the marriage of Meera Thakur, the eldest daughter of the Thakur family, to a man named Ravindra from the neighboring district. 211 people sat down for the wedding feast that evening. The cook, a woman named Kamla Devi who had fed the village for 30 years, spent 4 days preparing the meal herself, insisting that no dish touch the tables until she had tasted it personally, a habit born from pride rather than caution. Nobody knows exactly what went wrong. Some records, pulled decades later from a district health office in a nearby town, mention a delayed shipment of grain that had been stored improperly, contaminated by a fungus that thrives in damp granaries. Others in the surrounding villages still whisper that it was never the grain at all, but something Kamla Devi put into the food on purpose, a final act of grief after learning, only hours before the ceremony, that her own son had drowned in the river that morning, and that no one had thought to tell her until the soup was already boiling. Whatever the cause, every person who ate that night fell ill within the hour. By morning, all 211 were dead, including the bride, the groom, and Kamla Devi herself, who was found slumped against her clay oven with a ladle still in her hand. The district administration sealed the village roads within a week, cremated what could be cremated, and quietly struck Chandpur Khera from the local map, the way you might tear a stained page out of a ledger rather than try to clean it. Families of the dead were compensated and resettled. Nobody came back. For 4 decades, the village sat empty, its temple bells silent, its wells slowly filling with algae, its 211 front doors left open by people who never returned to close them. Then, 12 years ago, a forest ranger named Devraj Solanki was surveying the tree-line near Chandpur Khera when he lost track of the hour and found himself walking through the village at dusk. He has told the story so many times since that the details have worn smooth like a stone handled too often, but he still swears that the smell reached him before he saw anything, the smell of ghee and roasted cumin drifting through streets that had not held a cooking fire in 40 years. He followed it to the old Thakur house, where the roof had fallen in on one side and a fig tree had grown straight through the kitchen floor, and there, through a window with no glass left in it, he saw a table set for 12, steam curling off the rice, the plates arranged with a precision that suggested someone had measured the distance between each one. He did not go inside. He ran the 4 kilometers back to his jeep and did not return to that stretch of forest for 3 years. Since then, others have gone looking. A documentary crew from a regional television station spent one night in the village in 2019 and left before dawn, their equipment intact but their footage, when reviewed later, showing nothing but static during the exact window between 7 and 8 in the evening, the same hour, always, when the meal appears. Local farmers who graze goats near the outskirts have learned to be gone from the village boundary before sunset, not because anyone forces them, but because the silence that settles over Chandpur Khera in the final hour of daylight has a texture to it, a held breath, that makes the skin on the back of your neck tighten before you consciously understand why. What makes the mystery unbearable is not just that the food appears, but that it appears correctly. Visitors who have dared to stay and observe report that the dishes match, almost exactly, what older residents of the district remember being served at Chandpur Khera weddings and festivals decades ago, down to specific proportions of spice that no modern cook in the region still uses. The rice is a variety no longer grown locally, sourced, as far as anyone can tell, from nowhere. The steam is real, warm to the touch if you are brave enough to hold your hand above a bowl, and the smell fades within an hour, the same way any real meal's smell would fade, except that no meal is ever eaten. By morning, the plates are empty of steam, cold, but never dirty, as if whoever set the table also cleared it in the hours before dawn while the world was looking away. A retired anthropologist who spent 2 seasons studying abandoned settlements across the region offers one explanation, though she is careful to call it a theory rather than a fact. She believes what happens in Chandpur Khera every evening is not haunting in the sense of restless spirits wandering without purpose, but repetition, an event so violently unfinished that it has worn a groove into the place itself, the way a river carves the same channel through rock for centuries after the original flood has receded. The wedding feast never concluded. 211 guests never rose from that table satisfied. And so, the theory goes, the last hour of Kamla Devi's life, the hour she spent cooking with a broken heart for a celebration she no longer believed in, keeps happening on a loop at the same hour, forever, because grief that sharp does not know how to stop. But there is a second story, quieter, that only the oldest residents of the surrounding district will tell, and only if you do not write down their names. They say Kamla Devi is not trapped in that hour by accident. They say she chose it. That when she realized what the contaminated grain had done, when she understood that her cooking, the one thing she had given her whole life to, had killed the very people she meant to celebrate, she made a vow before she died, whispered over the ladle in her hand, that she would cook for them until the debt was settled, until every one of the 211 guests had finally eaten a meal that did not harm them. And so every evening, at the same hour, she tries again. The steam rises. The plates are set. And every night, for 41 years, nobody comes to eat, because the dead do not need food, only the promise of it, and a woman who cannot forgive herself keeps making a meal that will never again be shared. Nobody who has visited Chandpur Khera at the right hour has stayed to see whether that finally changes. The forest ranger, Devraj Solanki, still keeps a photograph on his phone that he took from a distance that first evening, an image so blurred by his shaking hands that it shows little more than a warm rectangle of light in a broken window, and a shape near the stove that could be steam, or could be the edge of a sari, still moving after all these years, still stirring a pot for guests who will never again sit down. If you ever find yourself near the border of that forest as the light begins to fail, and the wind carries something that smells faintly of cumin and ghee, the villagers in the district have only one piece of advice, offered without exception. Do not follow the smell. Whatever hunger it seems to promise, it is not meant for you.